Yeah, here we go now, baby. Right back into the action for another day of the week. Welcome to the Wednesday edition of Before You Bet. You're live right now on the Covers YouTube and X channel. We are proudly presented by BetMGM. Hit them up for all of your sports betting needs. Okay, so a great big show planned for you guys today. Jon Middlekauff will be by in a matter of seconds to get into some of the hot topics in the NFL and discuss some of these games in Week 5, starting here tomorrow, Thursday Night Football. 4 MLB playoff games. After that, we got a bet for every single one of them. Then we're going to continue with our NBA futures coverage, team betting previews for the defending champion Boston Celtics and the Golden State Warriors. If you guys want to participate in the show today, very easy to do so. Hit up that live chat on X and on YouTube. Let us know who you like today on the diamond. Let us know who you like in Week 5 of the NFL season. Okay. Enough small talk. Let's get right into it. Let's go down to our man in Arizona, Jon Middlekauff. Jon, how you making out?
Pretty good. How are you doing?
Fantastic. Okay, we got a lot to discuss here. We always have a lot to discuss in the world of the NFL. So let's get into some of the hot topics. Then we'll get into some analysis for the games this weekend. Your best bets coming off a 2-1 performance on last week's show. Okay, so who could have saw this coming? Davante Adams wants out of Las Vegas. It looks like the Raiders are going to play ball and oblige. Where do you think some realistic landing spots for Adams are?
Well, it's a little complicated when you get a guy that makes a lot of money in a lot of the top teams, looking at the cap space available. Obviously, they're not going to trade him to Kansas City, so that's not even an option. But, Buffalo, Baltimore, New Orleans, where his good friend and wide receiver coach are, it does complicate things. I go back and forth. Would a team be willing to give up a little more if he would do a restructure / kind of contract extension? And the reality is statistically, he's, it's kind of like, is it the Raiders or is he an aging player who's not quite the same, who still wants a lot of money? So would a team be willing to trade for him in season and do some sort of contract extension? I wonder if that's a little more difficult than the way we would have thought about that a couple of years ago. It'd be a no-brainer. So I think this is a little complicated. You see people throwing out there the Raiders want a second-round pick, which I don't blame them. They gave up a first- and second-round pick for them. But the history of the Raiders, they trade premiums for guys, and then they get rid of them for less. And we had a wide receiver situation, not apples to apples, but the team has not been good. When Randy Moss, they trade a lot for him, and they gave him away for basically nothing.
Yeah.
And I saw Albert Breer throwing out that the comp around league circles is kind of Keenan Allen, who definitely did not go for a second-round pick in the sense of, older player, productive player. I think he's had more injuries than Davante, but I do think it's, the way fans talk about it and the way teams look at it. I can't imagine they have many second-round picks on the table right now. How we're talking here on Wednesday, I'm sure the Raiders are in meetings as we speak. He hasn't been traded, right? And if they would have got what they wanted over the last 12 hours, he'd already be on a different team. And this is where I think that these other teams think they got a little leverage. Like, we're not going to break the bank with a second-round pick, which consistently gives you high-end Pro Bowl level starters for cheap value. So I think they're kind of in a staring contest. And what are they going to do? Just have him be around all week? It's already weird, but this is the Raiders.
Yeah, so you can't play him, right? Because if he gets injured,
no,
that's it.
Can't. And he's already, injured, right? He didn't play last week. And now we look back at the decision with their head coach who made the comments of business decisions. I think we all assumed he was talking about effort and guys on the field, which he might have been, but I think it's fair to assume that Davante was part of that comment as well. Like, I'm not going to get hurt on your guys' watch when this thing's over anyway. And let's face it, I use social media. You use social media. Most people do. But can you have your head coach liking things on a Monday of a work week? Can you imagine Mike Tomlin or Andy Reid or Kyle Shanahan or Sean McVay in that situation? Now, you could also, counter me by saying, who cares? We're going to trade him anyway. And there's some fairness to that. But you just make a weird situation way weirder.
NFL trade deadline, by the way, on the same day as the U.S. presidential election. That's going to be
Yeah,
a very interesting day, right?
yeah. To me, he won't even be there by the
No, he
time
won't
that
last that
happens.
long.
No.
Okay, so one team that might be in the mix before the trade deadline, the Kansas City Chiefs. They got skill players dropping like flies. Rashee Rice, it looked like he was on the verge of a breakout season. He's probably done for the year now. Are they in trouble, or do you think they're going to put the pieces back together like they always seem to do?
Well, offensively, they are. Rashee Rice wasn't just a breakout player; like he was a high-end, really good player. And Pacheco, let's face it, for a guy that loves passing the ball, they really relied on him. Coach Reed, he'd not just become their starting running back, but he'd become a huge part of their offense. So that's to have those two losses in like a 14-day period. Obviously guys get injured and you break your leg. There's nothing you can do about it. But the circumstance in which Rice got hurt, right? Mahomes throws a bad pick and then hits him like he's John Lynch or Steve Atwater. It was just a disaster. He obviously didn't mean to do it, but that really, really stinks. And like we mentioned earlier with Devontae, who's really a non-starter for them because the Raiders never would, they don't have much cap space. So trading for some of these guys that they're linked to, there would have to be some concessions back and forth. A team picks up more money. It's not just I trade you a third round pick for Amari Cooper, right? It's not, these things aren't that simple. And that's where I think it makes a lot more complicated for them. Now, luckily for them, at 4-0, you don't have to press and overpay on anybody, right? Because they can just keep winning ugly, as they've really been doing now for a couple of years. And they will trade for somebody. But I would imagine that they're like, well, we're gonna take a deep breath here before we just give a second round pick. When who are we bidding against on October 2nd? Now, you could also argue, how often do you get the opportunity to have a team that just knows how to win with this level of quarterback, this coach? Why wouldn't you want to get the guy as early as possible? So I'm sure. I mean, I know these guys. They've had long conversations the last 48 hours about how to approach this, and they're not in the business of just signing some wide receiver from a practice squad. This is, they'll go big game hunting, relatively speaking, to who's available for them. They're not going to go back down the Tyreek Hill kind of road again. That ship has sailed. But Amari Cooper, DeAndre Hopkins, the list of big names on teams that are clearly not going in. Christian Kirk is a guy, but again, he makes a lot of money, and that's what complicates the situation for a team that has under $5 million in cap space. So in a hard cap league, you do have to make things fit, even if there are ways to kind of circumvent that with bonusing your own players, moving money around. But, Chiefs are like, well, who are we doing this for? I think that's the big question mark.
Okay, so from one of the best teams in the NFL to suddenly maybe the worst team in the NFL, the Miami Dolphins have absolutely fallen off of a cliff. Like, it's one thing to lose games, and sometimes you'll get a pass if the starting quarterback goes down. But in the 9.5 quarters since Tua went out in that game versus the Bills, the Dolphins have scored 15 points. And this is with offensive genius Mike McDaniel at the helm there as head coach. So I think McDaniel's looking like the second coming of Brandon Staley all of a sudden. Staley fell off a cliff. Everyone loved him in year one. Then everyone kind of turned on him. We're starting to see people turn on Mike McDaniel. He's getting mocked quite a bit. He seemed to be more focused on his new hairstyle than this offense and, getting a decent backup quarterback in there. But tricky spot for the Dolphins here, John. They just signed McDaniel to an extension. We know they gave Tua all the money. What is your forecast for this team for the rest of the season? And do you think McDaniel's on a fast track to getting fired here?
Well, I think the version that we saw now, I thought they were going to take a step back, and that was assuming Tua was not going to get concussed, even if he played 17 games. I thought this team was not as good as the last couple of years and more likely to win in that 7-8 range and not be a playoff team. And I still feel that way. As the team that we saw against Buffalo, they're just not as good. And defensively, I don't trust them. Their offensive line is bad. And I've said all along, like, I don't love the Tua contract because I don't like paying premiums for non-premiums. But, like, he had value. Like, why couldn't you pay him the Daniel Jones, Derek Carr contract? And the argument is his stats and everything. Well, it's like I just watch the guy in the biggest games and he doesn't play that well, but you remove him, I think you hit the nail on the head. This version minus Tua is the worst team in the league because we've seen the Pats be competitive and then they've had, the same quarterback the whole time. The Panthers are a different operation with Andy Dalton. They're scoring points now. And Miami's unwatchable. I mean, they're just, and in fairness to Mike, you have to start Tyler Huntley. You're going to have problems, but you can already, Tyreek Hill, and I don't blame him. You kind of mentally check out. Those guys, Waddle and Hill become pretty useless because they're so skilled when your quarterback play is immediately the worst in the league, like the worst in the league. And it's why it's one of my favorite bets this weekend is bet against them. And I'm going to. And I think this notion of, and I said this the other day on the podcast, like you see what the Raiders doing. Like I would trade Tyreek Hill right now. Because unlike Devontae, I think it's universally agreed upon, still an elite player.
Yeah.
And I still think, if for the right situation, you might have to eat a little money, you get a first round pick for him. He's that, like, there's no question his dominance, how good he looks, even in that game, him flying around. So his talent has not diminished at all. And I still think it's fair to say he's clearly just a guy who's kept himself in great shape. His game translates. He's also not a one-trick pony, right? He can run all the short stuff, obviously go over the middle. He can go deep. To me, he has a lot of value. Now, I understand, wait for Tua. Like, no, the Tua thing's done. He might come back, but the Dolphins have to start thinking about another quarterback, right? They have to really start scouting these college quarterbacks because in no fault of his own, he just gets concussed a lot. And we know the details of guys that get concussed are more likely to get concussed. I've said all along, can the league allow them to put him back out there? Given, it doesn't take much. He doesn't need to take some hellacious hit to be KO'd. And by the time that he comes out, especially if they lose this week, lose the next couple of weeks, they're so far out of it. What are you even doing? Now, I get there is financial ramifications, the owner, can we get out of what percentage can we get out of? It's just a mess. It's immediately really messy. Let's face it, the Jags are 0-4. But if you watch the Jags, they don't know how to win and their quarterback's underperforming, but they're playing way better than the Dolphins.
Yeah, it looks like the Dolphins had a little window, I think, last year, and I think that window might be slamming shut on them.
Weren't they 10-2 or 10-3, and they were in complete control of the division? You win the division, you get a home game, huge advantage for them playing at home because of weather circumstances in January. Maybe you win a playoff game. It's like, when's the last time the Dolphins won a playoff game? Everyone would be feeling themselves. Instead, it crumbles.
Yeah.
They embarrass themselves down the stretch. They get embarrassed in the playoff game because it's freezing cold. And now it feels like it's over. That's where my stance is. Everyone's talking about Devontae Adams. Why wouldn't they be trading Tyreek Hill right now?
Yeah, that might be the move to make. My one concern with that is that the general manager might be working for his job, essentially. But maybe it would be a positive if he's able to bring something back for Tyreek, who is a bit of a ticking time bomb. Let's be fair. Trouble does seem to follow this guy. And it's not always stuff like, the incident with the police. We won't break that down. But, a different story coming out about a different kid that he has. I don't know if he's up to double digits now. His house burning down before that Week 18 game against the Bills. It's always a lot of stuff.
Yeah, and that's the pushback of if his character was clean and there were no questions about anything off the field, you would be, I think, a lock to get a first-round pick for him. But I would imagine some teams go, is this can we handle this? Andy Reid's a pretty unique situation. And let's face it, Miami, perfect circumstances. Quarterback was pretty good deep ball thrower. And he was vibing. I mean, he was crushing it there. So now you see they start getting embarrassed. What happens? He immediately just beelines out of the locker room at the end of the game, and things could get weird. And that to me is why you got to try to trade him now, because it could get weirder. And, even in defense of him, maybe he makes a couple comments. All of a sudden it's like, So that thing, it's not even a ticking time bomb in Miami. The bomb went off the moment Tua was laying on the ground.
Okay, so no doubt about it, the Dolphins and Mike McDaniel absolutely exposed as frauds. This was a bit of a theme for them last season. It was a theme for the Dallas Cowboys as well. They got exposed in the playoffs when Green Bay came to town. So this is something fans, we love to kick it around. Hey, that team's a fraud. And those are the two teams that got identified as that last season. So this season, we have 9 teams that have records above 500. Which team with a winning record would you say is the biggest fraud in the NFL right now?
That's a pretty good question. Damn, I think when you look around the league, I think a lot of these teams like Minnesota's real, right? I think when you watch Detroit the other night, you can be like, well, that always happens against Seattle. Well, and I know I did. I thought they were a Super Bowl contender, just like last year. Well, you can't win a Super Bowl if you can't cover the pass. And your DBs are just a major. I mean, they were committing personal PIs like every other pass. So when you look at the Lions' pass defense, it looks no different than last year. And listen, their offense, you play Seattle, they're missing like 17 starters. Yeah, you lit them up like a Christmas tree. But when you look at that division, you go, well, you can't, your DBs aren't playing very well. And if Aiden Hutchinson can't get a sack every other play, well, you got to play Minnesota. And Minnesota, they also have good wide receivers. Say what you want about Green Bay, they got good offensive weapons. So I think that Detroit game the other night was pretty concerning because I think everyone just goes, well, it's just a bad matchup. Well, what do you think? Minnesota's same thing. But unlike Seattle, I think Seattle's obviously better on defense when they have everyone playing. Minnesota's been unreal on defense, right? Because of Brian, and they have, you could argue, him and Spags, best defensive coordinators in the league right now. So that game was pretty concerning to me for Detroit. Everyone's like, well, their defense has been good the first 3 weeks. Well, it's like, yeah. Then you played a team that might be a wild card team in Seattle with offensive potency, which all these good NFC teams have. And it was crazy. And the score, Seattle was driving on one of the drives when DK fumbles, and that led to a field goal. So let's assume they would have scored. That game could have been a lot closer from the score point or score standpoint than the final score looks a little bit more blowouty. And it just gives me concerns as someone that bet on. The other thing is the Houston Texans haven't quite, and they were a team that I like to be the number 1 seed, a team I thought could win the Super Bowl. They just haven't quite looked as sharp and as dominant as I thought that they would be. I mean, that game against Chicago manhandled them. And then as time went on, you went, well, maybe Chicago's not that good. So I'm not selling my stock. Like, I think Detroit and Houston are block playoff teams.
Yeah.
But as teams that I thought, like, that could be the Super Bowl, Houston versus Detroit. You kind of got to figure some stuff out. The thing with Houston, one thing Detroit has, at any moment, they can just run the ball, slow down the game. I mean, their offense is really, really good. Houston, if Mixon isn't rolling, all of a sudden it's like, you can't just pass it. This isn't Ohio State. And Nico Collins has been incredible, but running the ball is just one thing Detroit has in their back pocket, which even if their defense isn't playing well, they can really, really slow down the game. So that's a nice little, change up to throw. Houston, I mean, they were kind of getting worked in that game against Jacksonville, and Trevor Lawrence was not good.
Yeah, that was not an easy win for the Texans. Okay, so we're going to provide some analysis for some of these games in a second, but let's talk a little business first. So the NFL is going to London, the first London game of the season. You kind of see some breadcrumbs that there's eventually going to be a team there. It's a business, the NFL. The point of the NFL is to make money. London, one of the biggest markets in all of the world. So logistically, there would be some issues. But how far off do you think we are from an NFL team being in London?
Well, I always thought that it was just, if they ever were going to do it, they would just move Jacksonville, and then Jacksonville reinvested, in Jacksonville, is building a really expensive practice facility. And a lot of people have pushed back that that's ever going to happen. The thing with expansion, right? So if you just expanded 2 more teams, would they both be in Europe? To me, that would be a little complicated, but it would also make more logistical sense where you could just send teams to play them both consistently. I do think it's difficult from just an operating standpoint. Every week, front offices bring in guys to work out. Guys get injured. You elevate. You sign guys from other practice squads. Half of them are probably West Coast based, street free agents that live in LA. It's not an easy logistical thing for the NFL. Maybe they can just have their cake and eat it too, and just play a bunch of games over there, and on a yearly basis play 8 to 10 games instead of, I think historically it's closer to like 3 or 4 international games. And that's what it feels like they've done. But they also like going other places, right? They've gone to Mexico City. This year they went to Brazil. I think some people have kicked around, could they go London and Mexico City? I don't know. I've waffled on this. As we sit here right now, I would say that we don't see a team over there, but you can never say never, because I think it's pretty easy for them just to keep rolling out these and just expand it, right? Just make, instead of 4 games, make it 10. And I think that's probably more likely. And what's the rush? The good thing for them is they're making so much money. They don't have to force feed anything. I get asked a lot, could you ever see a Super Bowl in London? And my initial reaction is no, but I would never take anything off the table in terms of that.
Yeah, a lot of NBA players.
The timing of the game, because of their time change, is a little right. It's why the games kick off at early in the morning for us on the West Coast, and by the end of the game, it's usually close to night.
Yeah, it's a bit of a logistics nightmare. Even in the NBA, I'm a fan of the Toronto Raptors, and they get a lot of pushback when players get traded there, or they try to get free agents. That's just across the border. Never mind guys going over to a different continent altogether.
Look at the NBA, right? They're probably going to expand. Well, they're going to more than likely go to Vegas and Seattle. Yeah. Well, the NFL is already in those markets. Like, name a market, like Oakland just lost teams. Like, they're never they would never get a team in 2025. But like, there's not a market that matters that the NFL is not well established in. And then they also have some of these obviously smaller markets, like Green Bay's very unique situation. If you could do it over again, like, would Jacksonville have a team? Like, if you were creating that today, the Carolina Panthers make sense. Charlotte's a booming city. I think if you were starting the Jacksonville Jags right now, London would make a lot of sense. But if he's all in and puts his chips in the middle of the table about financially backing that city, I just think that they're more than likely going to stay and just continue to stink.
Okay, let's talk about this London game. It's going to be all-day football for us football fans and bettors here on Sunday. London with the red-hot Vikings, undefeated, straight up, and against the spread. Going against the Jets, I think the spread's a little short here. Vikings favored by just 2.5. Can the Jets put it together versus a good team?
Well, now Rodgers is kind of banged up. He said yesterday, his knee swelled up a little bit, and you could tell by the end of that game, it's weird, against the Pats, who might be a JV team, he looked really good. He looked much closer to the MVP version of Rodgers that we just saw a couple years back. And then in that game, it was raining, bad weather, him getting hit. He looked pretty old. So to me, the thing with older players is, even if you don't quote unquote get injured, it's harder to get back up. And now the long travel, weird spot for them. And let's face it, they're taking a lot of heat because of the relationship of the coach and the quarterback, which makes sense. Like, the coach has never proven he can win. The quarterback has really no equity in terms of the city, because last year he only played 4 or 5 snaps. And this is a game, I don't want to say must win, but this is the type of situation. This is why it's going to be such a roller coaster. Every time they lose, it's an enormous story. And then every time they win, we overreact and go the other way. Where most teams, it's like, yeah, nice win by the Lions. They figured it out. It's not like the end of the world or a complete party. I think it's very, very hard to ride that emotional roller coaster, but that's what they signed up for. This was always going to be, this is not some long-term solution. They're all in on this season. It's why people keep talking like, does it make sense for them just to go all in for Devontae Adams? And it might, because like there is no next year for any of these guys. And, if you think about Minnesota, if they go 13-4 or 12-5, which is clearly very possible, they're going to lose some games. That's part of it. Like, if you have a great season, go 12-5, you lose 5 games. Like, this is the Jets got to find a way. Like, wouldn't be the craziest thing. Be like, they're coming off 4-0. They've looked awesome. Go across the pond. kind of lay an egg. Now it's hard. It's easy to say that just big picture because that's the way it happens, but it's hard to like visualize that given how they've played. And Flores has been so good. Their offense is just rolling. They have so many offensive weapons. I mean, Jefferson's the best wide receiver in the league. Jordan Addison's fantastic. Aaron Jones is an unreal addition. He's been one of the more underappreciated players in the league, I think, over the course of the last 5 years. And obviously their coaching staff, so if you just think about it, okay, Rodgers, when healthy, is just, you would bet on him before Sam Darnold, even the way Sam Darnold's playing. But the coaching staff mismatch in this game is pretty gigantic.
Yeah, it's funny with the Jets. It's either, hey, this team might be a Super Bowl contender, or the sky is falling. We got to fire everybody. So, yeah, it'll be interesting to see what the discussion points are after that game. Okay, really competitive-looking game going on down in Houston. The Texans playing host to the Buffalo Bills, who were an absolute buzzsaw in their first 3 games, and a bit of a no-show performance there on Sunday Night Football in Baltimore. They're favored by a point. The Bills are. Which version of that team do you think shows up here on Sunday?
Well, that first half got away from him, right? Henry bust the run early. Lamar was humming, and all of a sudden it's like, damn, we're down 21-3. But when they scored and then they had the ball back and were driving before the trick play, you're like, this thing's about to be 21-17. And then the trick play is a historic disaster, right? Fumble, Josh gets lit up, leads right to a touchdown, and the game's over. So because of the loss to the Raiders, the Ravens really had to click it into gear. And in fairness to them, they have. But I still think if you just remove one bad half of football, the Bills have been really good for 3.5 quarters. So I don't know how you don't like Buffalo in this spot, especially with the Texans just looking a little off. So I would expect a much more, what an easy spot too for Sean McDermott this week, playing another playoff team coming off an embarrassing loss on Sunday Night Football. I think we're going to see the version of the Bills that we saw the first 3 weeks. Now, there's also a big spot for the Texans. If you liked them to be the number 1 seed, if you liked them to be a 12-13 win team, if you like them to be a Super Bowl contender, they answer the bell here because they got I don't want to say lucky, but let's face it, if the Jags are able to score in the red zone from like the 2 or 3 yard line, and they went backwards, and then called a quarterback sneak that he didn't gain any yards. Who knows? That becomes a double-digit game and they lose. So, and how are we talking about the Texans today if they had lost to the Jags? So this is a great game.
Okay, another great game. I think probably the game of the week. It's the Bengals and the Ravens. The Ravens look to be back in top form. They traveled to Cincinnati, favored by 2.5, a total of 50.5. I think that's the highest of the week here. So weird season for the Bengals, right? They really played down to the competition. Like the Panthers were in that game halfway through the fourth quarter. It was a 1-score game. They were within 7 points, but the Bengals end up pulling away, winning the game, covering the spread. But then, you see them go toe-to-toe right down to the final minutes versus the Kansas City Chiefs. So do you think this pattern continues for the Bengals on Sunday versus another good team?
Yeah, they're a hard team to gauge because the Ravens team that we saw the last 2 weeks in the first half, you just go, this is the team that we saw last year as the number 1 seed that was the favorite to win the Super Bowl, right? They were favored against the Chiefs, then they would have been favored against the Niners because they shellacked them on Monday Night Football. I do think we'd look at the Bengals a little bit differently if they play the Pats 10 times, they win that game 9.5 times. So if they had just won that game and they're 2-2, I think we would view them a little bit differently. Anytime that you're 0-3 and your 1 win comes against the Carolina Panthers, you're just not going to get that much credit. Jamar Chase has come alive a little bit these last couple weeks, right? Has the 2 touchdowns on Monday night, has the big play last week. They get a pretty easy victory against Carolina. Anytime these divisional games happen, things get weird. But to me, if the Ravens team shows up that we've seen the last 2 weeks out the gates, I think they're just beating everybody. And how long can you maintain that? And last year they maintained it most of the season, right? They had historic numbers on their side. Obviously, their defense was elite. They were just destroying. I mean, they beat, I forget off the top of my head how many teams by like 20 plus. They were destroying people.
Yeah.
And that's what they did to the Cowboys and the Bills, which even if you don't love the Cowboys, Like they're a real team. They shellacked them on the road, and the Bills was a good spot for them. But still, I mean, it's weird, right? If the Ravens do it again, we'll just be like universally they're back. They're easily one of the best teams in the league. And if Cincinnati were to win this game, all of a sudden we'd be like, okay, they kind of got their mojo back.
Yeah, things get interesting if the Bengals win for sure. Okay, let's get into a couple of your best bets here. You alluded to this one off the top. You do not like the Miami Dolphins going up to New England to take on the Patriots. You'll take the Patriots as a single-point favorite in this one.
I would bet against them against any team in the league on the road for sure.
Yeah.
You're the Tyler Huntley situation, how fast Tyreek could just check out. Their defense is in shambles, right? And, Mike McDaniel, I think the NFL people kind of, roll their eyes. He's wearing the capri pants, the glasses, the hair. Like Mike Tomlin's worn the same outfit for 15 years. You think Andy Reid thinks twice about what he's wearing? It's like, is this guy into the right things? And you get like everyone loves it when you're winning. Well, now everyone is going to turn on you. So I obviously I don't think the Patriots are any good, but at home against a team that's in absolute shambles, this number, I mean, this morning it was -1. I would probably hammer this anything up to 2.5 for the Pats. Field goal get weird, but the version we saw of Tyler Huntley, I know he had some success for the Ravens, but let's think about the Ravens. Pretty good spot for quarterbacks. Like if Josh Johnson had to come in for Lamar in a game, I don't think we would just write the Ravens off because of the way they can play defense, the way they can run the ball, the way they can manipulate stuff on offense, quick screens to their wide receivers. I just think Miami, that's the worst team in the league when you're rolling out Tyler Huntley and you have some of these defensive injuries.
Yeah, the Dolphins stink. And as I've told you, I am a fan of the Miami Dolphins. Unfortunately, I've watched every single snap of the Miami Dolphins for as long as I can remember. 2-10 in prime time, by the way, for the Miami Dolphins. It's
been a tough run for you, huh?
Well, it's so dramatic. It's either they're scoring 70 points or ripping off highlights, or they go 2-10 in prime time and absolutely destroy my sleep. Now, my son, who's 7 years old, he loves sports. He sits and watches football with me. I say, you are at an age where you can hop on a bandwagon, because a kid will often hop on a bandwagon or pick their dad's favorite team. Hop on the Kansas City Chiefs bandwagon, son. Patrick Mahomes is probably going to win at least 2 more Super Bowls.
Enjoy the next decade.
Yeah, it's a good time. Okay, let's keep rolling with the best bets here. The Colts, a 3-point underdog, taking on the Jacksonville Jaguars. Interesting trend in this game. You have to take these trends with a grain of salt, obviously. But the Colts are 0-8 against the spread in their last 8 games in Jacksonville. You think this slide comes to an end, though? You like the Colts to cover?
This is a tough week because you either feel comfortable betting on like 2 good teams, Bills, Houston, even Cincinnati's not as bad as that they showed, the Ravens divisional game, or you just bet some of these terrible games, or it's just 2 bad teams, 2 teams that could be drafting in the top 10. And one thing I think Flacco has shown is Joe Flacco's a curveball. And he did this last year in Cleveland, obviously. Now, I know that situation was a little bit different because their defense was really good, and that has not really been the Colts' forte, is playing defense, though they were much better, right, last week in the first half. I just think Jacksonville, you already got questions about guys quitting on Doug Peterson in the locker room. Doug Peterson this morning pushes back against that. Their quarterback is just independent of play calling, of all the different circumstances excuses make. If you just watch him play, he's been really, really bad. He has not been very good. So I'm just betting against that situation. I really am. And I'm betting on a coach that I have faith in Shane Steichen. I think he's an excellent offensive coordinator. I think, when Anthony Richardson is just being really inaccurate, it is hard to coach that. And now he gets a guy who he can, like, the one thing Shane has proven is he can change immediately with his quarterback, right? He plays a certain way with Anthony Richardson. Last year, he changed the scheme for Gardner Minshew. Flacco's different, both those guys, because he can't move at all. Changed the scheme immediately. And I just trust the coach. And I think the quarterback, in a weird way, who would have thought this 5 years ago, brings an energy to a team that was really out of sorts with Anthony Richardson. And listen, he's going to have the stinkers. Let's just say Anthony Richardson's out for the year. I know he's not, but let's just say Joe Flacco started there are going to be some games where Flacco throws 3 picks. I just think early on that momentum against this team, like if you can get a lead, even if it's like 7-0 after the first quarter, Indy, you got checkout potential in Jacksonville. And I know it's early October, but it's when you go 0-4 and you've got your butt kicked, but you've also lost some tight games. They've kind of had it all these questions about the coach. I know the stats are against me, but that is not Joe Flacco. That's not Joe Flacco. That's some Gardner Minshew. That's obviously some Anthony Richardson, some other random quarterbacks. Like their quarterback situation, Flacco just stabilizes it, allows everyone to take a deep breath. And their defense obviously has missed some guys. It's weird. You watch Jacksonville, they do have good players at different positions.
Yeah.
So you would just say, hey, if Trevor Lawrence was playing well, this team probably be 2-2. They easily could have won the Miami game. They should have won last week. But once you get on that teeter-totter of like, is our season already over and the coach could get fired like next week, that's when you just lose people, even if you do have talent at different positions.
Okay, last but not least, all of a sudden, the Carolina Panthers, kind of a fun team, and props to them for righting the ship a little bit because it looked like things were going to fall off a cliff after 2 weeks. But they go into Chicago to take on the Bears. The Panthers, a plus 3.5 point dog, and you think they show up and give the Bears a game?
Yeah, my logic last week on I didn't think Washington would win the way they did, but just you had to hammer the team getting, whether it was Arizona at Washington or Washington at Arizona, if you're getting more than a field goal in that game, you got to hammer that team. And when I look at Carolina, like this is not the Bryce Young team. They have looked just like a solid bad team, right? Bad teams win 5-6 games throughout the season. And Andy Dalton, like they've scored a bunch of points against the Raiders. They scored 24 last week. So the offense has life. And the difference of Jacksonville and Carolina, it's like Carolina's tapping out, Jacksonville's tapping out. Carolina's like, God, we can play a little football now.
Yeah.
And the Bears situation, they played a Rams team who, coming off that emotional win against the 49ers, has to go long travel, early kickoff, playing with nobody. And that game was really tight. That is not easy. And listen, I know Caleb has played better these last couple weeks, but unlike Jaden, he still misses a lot of passes. He's not someone like, from betting on his individual props, you would feel comfortable doing. Because there are guys that get open. He's airmailing DJ Moore. Now, he hasn't turned the ball over. He didn't throw a pick. And their run game last week finally showed up, right? They ran. DeAndre Swift had been MIA early part of the season. Then he has a big game, and they run for 130 yards. And Caleb passed a lot less. The previous week was like 50 pass attempts. Last week was 23. But if that's the way you're going to play, you're not going to score that many points, right? They probably want to win the game like 20-17. Well, that happens. I'll take Carolina 3.5. So I think a lower scoring game with a quarterback in Andy Dalton that just knows how to function. I just think this is a good spot for him.
Okay, so we're backing Andy Dalton and Joe Flacco and Jacoby.
Yeah,
this week.
Like I said, this is you either pick one of the good teams playing another good team, or you're doing this. Or, I looked at Arizona, it's like 7.5. Well, they've been, what the hell was that last week? Now maybe they got a little more fight in them.
I thought they were going to be a little bit more scrappy this season. They looked good in that week 2 game. I think it was against the Rams when the Rams didn't have anybody. But I don't know if they're going to live up to what I thought they were going to be, the Arizona Cardinals. Rough couple of games for them. Okay, John, we will leave it at that, though. We wish you best of luck with those picks. Hopefully we're back with you again next week, celebrating another winning week. Enjoy the rest of your week. Enjoy the football this weekend. We'll catch you again next Wednesday.
Yeah, sorry for your Dolphins, but keep your head high.
Thanks, man. Take it easy. All right. It's funny how he says, sorry for my Dolphins. I will get messages from random people saying, oh, man, I'm sorry to hear about or sorry to see what's going on with your Dolphins. You do get some people who are really rude about it, and that's part of it, right? You rub it in a little bit. I pick on Jets fans and stuff like that. You don't make it personal or anything, but yeah, I'll get it a little bit both ways. But I appreciate the condolences there, guys, on my Dolphins. I was walking with my wife there this morning, and she will often wear some of my ball caps, and she had been wearing a Miami Dolphins one. And I say, you shouldn't be wearing that around town anymore. Throw on the Penguins hat, baby. Okay, so from the NFL, great chat there with John Middlekauff. A couple guys in the live chat there right now. Guys, who do you like today on the diamond? Major League Baseball. Let's get right into it. 5 total bets. We bring in our guy, the Magic Ass Man, patiently waiting there in the green room. Metler, how we doing?
Your Dolphins helmet is gone, but the Vikings helmet is hanging in strong there. I didn't think, the win total was 7.5. I didn't think they'd be this good, but they're rolling, so it's good.
Yeah, you must be feeling pretty good about your Tigers, eh? Holy shit, 1 game away from advancing here.
I was joking with producer Mick. I have a wide array of favorite teams. Nobody can figure it out, but ever since I joined covers, all my favorite teams who were terrible, Vikings, Tigers, Magic, all of them are all contenders. So it's good. Game 1 there. I don't know what to expect for game 2. They threw a lot of their high leverage relievers yesterday too, obviously with Scooble too. So we'll see what they have in store today. Yeah,
I'm down bad with all of my favorite teams for the most part, but let's not be negative. Let's be positive. Let's have some positive results with these bets. You have a home run bet, and I have a bet for each game. Why don't you get us kicked off here? You like one of your favorite players to go yard here today.
Yeah, a little bit of a homer pick, right? Obviously, I'm a Tigers fan. I'm rooting them for the playoffs. I did bet Spencer Torkelson to hit a home run. Torque for this game. So when you look at the matchup specifically, he's facing Hunter Brown. Hunter Brown has a higher OPS against right-handed batters, but that's not really why I was going after this. What I'm more interested in, when you look at the Tigers lineup, it's left-handed hitter, like heavy, a lot of left-handed hitters. And the Astros responded to that by putting 3 left-handed relievers into their bullpen. And when you kind of look at the year Torkelson's had, he's not really someone you're going to bring in a reliever in specifically for. He didn't have a good year. So I just think there's, on top of the initial matchup where it's righty on righty, but the starting pitcher struggles a little more versus right-handed batters than left-handed batters. I think later in the game, you're going to see a lot of left-handed relievers. And I think Torkelson is someone who hits better against left-handed relievers. And I think he'll just catch a better matchup later in the game. And also recently, I'll probably watch more Tigers than anyone watching this show. If you watch them recently, 6 walks in his last 4 games. He's seeing the ball. He's someone who, if he connects, he connects. So plus 600, there wasn't the biggest edge mathematically when you look at this. It's about plus 540 was the projection. But I put in the covers picks page there that MGM has a 50% boost token that you can go throw at this, and that would boost it to plus 900. That obviously increases your edge drastically. So that's probably something I'd be interested in doing if I was going to bet it. I did bet it, but if you're going to go bet it, I would throw that boost token on it as well.
Let's go get that boost. Okay, so I went 1-3 with my picks there yesterday. I thought a little bit of a bad beat on the Severino one. I had him going under 16.5 total outs. He throws 5 innings. He's at, I think it was 93 pitches. He had already allowed 4 earned runs. I think he allowed 11 or 12 guys to get on base. So he's sitting there at 94 pitches. I'm feeling pretty damn good. At this point in the night, I hop in the shower, come back, check the phone. He's in there in the 6th inning pitching. I think he ended with like 108 pitches. So I think them having a 4-run lead gave them a little bit of confidence to bring him back. But it's funny, the bet that I felt the worst about, the Padres pitcher, the over on his hits, that ended up hitting. So thankfully I didn't get reverse swept. And let's just say this, when you're a sports bettor and you have, 4 or 5 bets and the first 3 or 4 of them loses, it feels very good when that last one wins and you do not get reverse swept. Getting reverse swept absolutely fucking sucks. So hopefully we can get the right sweep here tonight, John. Let's get into it. So I don't bet. Oh, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, I think you could argue the one bet that stops the reverse sweep is more exciting than the one bet that actually sweeps the board for you, like mentally, like going to bed. That's quickly. There's an NBA like last two years ago. I think I put out 8 props and I was sitting on 0-7, and then I got a John Collins assist prop to hit to go 1-7, and I don't know why. Just like that one, it was like, oh my god, thank God, because like it was like plus 160 whatever. But just the difference to just get one win, it's such a drastic swing on your day for the unit. So
it is. It's those days where you lose like 4.5, 5 units that can torpedo you. Yeah. So I went from, it would have been like a loss of like 4.3 units to only like 2.7, which sucks, but it's still not as bad as what it could have been. So Let's get positive here. I don't bet a whole lot of batter props, but I think we have an excellent spot here in this Astros-Tigers game. I'm going to target Yordan Alvarez to go over his total bases, even money on this one, plus 100. So I do think he could get off to a fast start. He might get up there and just smack a double, hopefully smack a home run for us. Taking on the Tigers, who are going with an opener, Tyler Holton. He is a left-handed pitcher, and Alvarez smacks lefties. A 362 average versus left-handed pitching, OPS over 1,000. And this man is a big game hitter. Check him out since the start of last season's postseason. 45 total bases in 12 postseason games, including 3 in the game yesterday. And he's been red hot at home. Go back to the start of September, a 386 average and OPS over 1,200. Alvarez to go over 1.5 total bases. Next up, something a little bit more basic. We're going to go under 7.5 runs in the Royals-Orioles game. Kansas City, I know they won yesterday. They won 1-0, but they continue to stink at the plate. They really struggled on the stretch of the regular season. They were dead last in OPS in all of Major League Baseball in September. They are ice cold here, guys. And speaking of ice cold, the Baltimore Orioles with runners in scoring position in the playoffs here, maybe a follow-up to last season. As you recall, they got swept out of the playoffs last year. They had a 211 batting average with runners in scoring position last season in the playoffs. Yesterday, they had plenty of opportunities, 1 for 7 with runners in scoring position. I don't know, man. Maybe the young guys feeling the heat a little bit. Maybe the pressure is getting to them. And then you check out the home-away pitching splits for each of these starters. Lugo, he's better on the road. Eflin is better at home. The under is hit in 5 of Lugo's last 6 starts. And check this out. 12 of Kansas City's last 15 games have stayed under 8 runs, mainly due to how bad their offense has been. Okay, so maybe a bit of a snoozer in Baltimore, maybe some excitement in Milwaukee. We're going to go over 7.5 in this one. How about those Mets, baby? So limited sample size here, guys, but sample sizes need to start somewhere, and each of these starters, pretty sketchy results in the playoffs for these guys. Sean Manaea has made 3 career appearances in the playoffs. He has a 15.26 ERA. He last appeared in the playoffs in 2022 as a San Diego Padre. He got blasted for 5 earned runs and 1.1 innings of work. Then we have Frankie Montas, former steroid user, by the way, throwing for the Brewers, a 9.45 ERA in 3 career postseason appearances. Mets hitters, what can you say about these guys? Extremely clutch. 16 runs scored in their last 2 games that have mattered. So they scored 8 yesterday, and then they scored 8 in game 1 there, the doubleheader versus the Braves on Monday to clinch their spot in the playoffs. And Mets bullpen, not strong, one of the worst in baseball to close out the regular season. And Brewers could be in a tough spot here. Frankie Montas gets chased early. Their bullpen is pretty good, to be fair, but they only got 4 innings out of Peralta there yesterday. So they might not have the availability that they would like if Montas can't go deeper into the game. And let's wrap things up with the first 5-inning bet. We're going to go with the Braves to be leading at the end of 5 in San Diego versus the Padres. Not a lot of people giving the Braves a chance, kind of limping into this one, hoping to keep their season alive. I think at least they can get off to a good start here in the first 5 innings. And this is all about the lefty-righty hitting splits. I think the starting pitching matchup is a little bit of a wash here. Musgrove versus Fried. Good-looking starting pitching matchup. Both guys in decent form. Both guys have been a little bit underwhelming in their postseason careers. And Musgrove, right-handed pitcher. Braves are absolutely hammering right-handed pitching right now. Not yesterday, but check out the bigger sample size. A league best 17 home runs with an OPS of almost 900 over the last 2 weeks versus righties. And then the Padres, they've struggled versus lefties over the last month. An OPS of not even 600. So, it might be 1-0, but I think the Braves will be leading at the end of 5, the nightcap there in beautiful San Diego. Guys, hit up that live chat. Who are you betting on? Who's closing out the series today? Who's staying alive? It's exciting. It kind of has a little bit of a closest as baseball will get to, like a March Madness feel, right? Big Brown says it's time to get down. Astros are not done. Take them on the run line. Yeah, I don't know, man. I
Don't let the Tigers get hot.
I hate the opener strategy. I don't care if it's a regular season game in the middle of May. I especially don't like it in a playoff game, but who knows? Maybe that will lead to some success here for Johnny's Tigers. Luke Murphy says he likes Musgrove to go over 16.5 outs. Yeah, the Braves were kind of flat, as a lot of people predicted yesterday. The doubleheader on Monday, fly across the country, face a really good pitcher. A lot of people counting them out. Who knows? Hopefully, it would be nice to see all of these go 3 games, but that's probably not going to be the case. Okay, Johnny, let's get into your sport, a little NBA. I will ask you, how many days until opening day now?
21.
21. Deion Sanders.
Games on Friday, though. Games on Friday. Preseason.
Yeah, preseason game in Abu Dhabi, apparently. Okay, so the way we're doing our NBA futures coverage, we're taking the marquee teams and kind of doing like team betting previews for each of them. And John's going to give out a fan-friendly bet for each of these teams. So let's start with the defending NBA Finals champion, the Boston Celtics, coming off one hell of a season. They're coming off a 64-18 regular season. They had a plus 11.4 point differential, the only team in double digits in point differential last season. Things came pretty easy for them last year, and you can criticize the easy path they had to the NBA Finals, but we've been over this, man. It's not their fault that all the other teams were getting injured. What do you want them to do? Sit out Tatum and Brown? Not going to happen. This team is just so incredibly stacked, John. They got 2, top 12, top 15 players, depending on where you want to rank Jaylen Brown, I guess. Some people will probably put Brown above Tatum. Holiday, Derek Brown, Porzingis will be back when it matters. Just an embarrassment of riches for them. Joe Mazzulla, he took his lumps early on. He's really coming into his own as a head coach. He's younger than me. He's 36 years old. Good for Joe Mazzulla. I don't know. I could envision them maybe taking their foot off the gas a little bit, maybe in the regular season. You see teams tend to do that, the successful teams. But you check out their odds here, plus 325 to win the NBA Finals. I don't necessarily love that. I don't like betting favorites to win any championship, really. Minus money to win the Atlantic there, minus 130. Win total of 58.5 after coming off that 64-win season. I could see them taking their foot off the gas a little bit and just kind of navigating the regular season a little bit. Key additions. I don't know who that first guy is. I do know who Lonnie Walker is. Key losses, none. And we'll get you to break down your futures bet here after we finish talking big picture Celtics stuff. Peyton Pritchard to win the 6-man. So your overall view of the Celtics coming in to the season as the defending champions.
Yeah, so I think one of the big things to highlight is obviously Kristaps Porzingis is out at the beginning of the year. Even like when you're looking at the futures odds for the NBA Cup, I don't even know if he's going to participate in that at all. So that's not really something I would want to go after with the Celtics. When you're looking at the Atlantic Division, they're minus 130. They're in a division with the Knicks and 76ers, who are 2 very capable teams of winning that division. Joe Mazzulla, going into last season, he was on JJ Redick's podcast, and he talked about one of the biggest errors he thought in his rookie year as a coach was he put a huge emphasis on getting the number 1 seed. And he thought he was like constantly trying to chase the Milwaukee Bucks, constantly trying to put out lineups that got the number 1 seed. He said he was obsessed with it. And he thought that was a mistake because ultimately it didn't really matter when it came to the playoffs. Now, last year, they got the number 1 seed. They won their division. So it's not that they're not capable of, but the fact that even Mazzulla is like, you've heard him say it's not something he's chasing, that their futures are just kind of meh. Like, it's weird to have a championship team and like such a really good team, and you kind of go through their futures and you're like, where do you really want to back them? I would probably go under on their win total, the 58.5. I just don't think they're going to press the issue. You go play into the NBA Finals. Your goal is to win another NBA Finals. This team is elite. But you kind of want to take your foot off the gas at the beginning of just a little bit. It's a long summer, especially your guys played in the Olympics as well. So 3 of them did. So not too many teams are saying 3 guys the Olympics. It's just, NBA Finals plus 325, just all that pricing. It was really hard. You're going through the futures market. You're looking for something to find for the Celtics as like a pro bet. It's just, everything kind of seems pretty well priced. Like for most teams, when you're trying to attack a futures market, you're looking for something different, something that's changed, and nothing's changed. We know who they are. They didn't really lose anyone. There's very clearly defined roles across everything. Like the Lakers have pretty much the same roster, but JJ Redick changes things, right? There's just really nothing different with the Celtics. So it did kind of make it is kind of challenging to find something to back here. There's not really anyone popping. It's just a really, really good team. The Atlantic Division thing, I like the Knicks. I think the Knicks are a better play in that spot. So I can talk about Peyton Pritchard here.
Yeah, your best bet for the Celtics. You like him to win 6-man potentially here.
Yeah, I'll give a shout out to Shane Jackson because we were texting about NBA futures last week, and he was the one who kind of put me onto him to even like look into it. I don't know if I would have surfaced this without him texting me about that. He said he played a long shot play on Peyton Pritchard. And the more you think about it, it's like kind of makes sense, right? When Peyton Pritchard gets those like extended minutes, or as a starter, I think he started 5 games last year, average of just under 25 points per game. He puts up numbers when he gets offensive numbers, and that really plays in the 6th man of the year. And you're down Porzingis to start the year. So there's going to be minutes available. It's not his position, but again, Celtics are 5-out, shoot the 3, right? So you're not going to play Horford. They definitely don't want to play Horford for 35 minutes a night. So they're going to have to try to figure out more minutes and stuff. And Peyton Pritchard, it's a big number, 100-1. And again, if you want to back off those minutes of Drew Holiday, Derek White, Jaylen Brown, Peyton Pritchard's again the guy that you would get more minutes. So I thought that was like the funnest angle. And it's a big number, 100-1. There's that the other ones I was kind of looking at was like NBA Cup to win the MVP. Derek White sitting there like 75-1. Could they win it? Sure. Could he have a run of like 3-4 games where he puts himself into that mix? Absolutely. It's just I don't know. I don't think Porzingis is going to be around for that. So are they the best play for that market? I don't think so either. So those were the two I was kind of looking at.
Celtics, yeah. One thing is for sure, I don't know if they will repeat, but they're going to have some stiffer competition here in 2024-25. So we do look forward to that. Now let's go over to the Western Conference and do a little preview of the Golden State Warriors. So I think it's fair to say that the Golden State Warriors, their championship window is officially shut. But when Steph Curry is on the floor, this team is appointment viewing. So you're always going to want to check out the Warriors. 40-1 to win the NBA championship, to win the division, plus 375. Win total of 43.5. They are coming off a 46-win season, and that only got them as far as the play-in round where they ended up losing. Key additions, Buddy Hield, Melton, and Anderson. The key losses, you guys might have heard of these guys, Klay Thompson and Chris Paul. Big names, but obviously players, at the tail end of their careers, fair to say. And your futures bet, you like Curry to average 28 or more points here. Like I said, fun team to watch. When I'm flipping through the channels, I see them on. I'm going to stop and check it out, but I wouldn't be shocked if they sneak into the playoffs, but it's an older roster. They had a lot of success. I think their championship window was done. So your big picture view of the Warriors, and we'll get you to break down your best bet for them.
Yeah, the Warriors, they made really good moves. Buddy Hield, I think D'Anthony Melton might file him under underrated signings of the entire offseason. I think he fits that category. He's an excellent role player. And then Kyle Anderson as well. Those moves look really good if they would have went and got a second superstar to put beside Steph Curry. But the fact that you're just rolling with Steph Curry, if they got Paul George, Lauri Markkanen was the guy I think they had to go get. If all of a sudden I was looking at this roster and even say Brandon Podziemski's gone, but Lauri Markkanen is in this roster, like it completely changes your opinion. But you're looking at them and Jonathan Kuminga and Andrew Wiggins, it's almost like the same player. And like when you look at just a younger version of Kuminga is like a younger version of Wiggins. When you look at the Warriors and you think of like Splash Brothers, shoots lots of threes, but like last year their spacing actually wasn't that great, and they weren't a really good 3-point shooting team. Like your Kuminga and Wiggins are ultra athletic, but they're not the best 3-point shooters. And then Chris Paul wasn't knocking down threes either. And Klay Thompson was regressed a bit as well. D'Anthony Melton shoots threes, Buddy Hield shoots threes. You're really heavily leaning on Stephen Curry at a point when in his career where he's going to be 36. And it's just, I think in the West too, right? If this was an Eastern Conference team, you kind of change your opinion. It's a very similar vibe to the Lakers, and the numbers are very similar too. Same win total, same, Pacific Division there, plus 375, kind of the same number there. They need another superstar to jump into that NBA Finals category. Pacific Division, I like the Phoenix Suns. It's not the Warriors. Win total here, I think their win total really hinges on, can Andrew Wiggins and Jonathan Kuminga shoot just a little bit better from three? I think that will be the deciding factor for them. Or can they go, I think the trades are done for them, but can they go make a trade for a center? Draymond Green, they go to the small ball, but I just can't believe Kevon Looney is still their center at this point in that for how long he has been. They haven't made a move there. Like even Towns would have looked great on this Warriors team. So the Warriors are just they're the same as the Lakers to me. It's just like a play-in team. We'll see.
Kevon Looney over on rebounds. It's kind of funny with Andrew Wiggins, who was a real a bit of a disappointment, I think, in Minnesota as a number 1 overall pick. He comes over, then he just goes bananas during that finals run. And now he's regressed back to being kind of a bum again. So, yeah, if this team wants to, sneak into the playoffs, he's one of the guys that's going to really have to step up for them. Okay, so that's the 2 teams that we're previewing today. John's going to be back next week where we're going to be getting into Bucks, Sixers, Suns, maybe some Clippers. There's a lot of high-profile teams that we're going to get into. Dallas Mavericks, the Nuggets, what's going on with them? Jamal Murray looked awful in the playoffs. Can he get back to top form? Is the Nuggets, is their championship window done? I don't know if they have the same supporting cast. I'm sure John's going to want to talk about it as Orlando Magic here at some point too, with the season approaching. And don't forget, John's going to be with us Monday through Friday when the NBA season starts, breaking down all of his favorite bets. Quick recap of our Major League Baseball bets. Alvarez over 1.5 total bases plus 100. Royals, Orioles under 7.5 minus 102. Mets, Brewers over 7.5 minus 115. Braves first 5 money line. We have the insurance of a push potentially minus 106. And Johnny likes Torque. Spencer Torkelson to hit a home run. So we will wish him good luck with that. And let's wrap up the show right now. Thanks to John and John for joining today. Thank you to producer Mick for producing. Thank you to BetMGM for sponsoring the show today. Thank you to all of the viewers who tuned in. Make sure you guys tune in again tomorrow, Thursday Night Football. Lots of college football discussion as well. And of course, Major League Baseball playoffs. Thank you guys for watching. Best of luck with your bets today and tonight. And we'll catch you guys again tomorrow. Woo!